Good morning and welcome to the 4th Annual Canadian Women in Cybersecurity Conference. Hard to believe that it's been 4 years already. I'm Heather Ricciuto and I am the host of this panel this morning. I'm joined today by Eloise, Karen, Sherifat, and Carlos. And we are here to talk about emotional intelligence and its relationship to cybersecurity. So, you all ready to begin? Yes?
I think we
okay,
are, yeah.
Awesome. Okay, so I don't know how many of you are familiar with emotional intelligence, but according to Dan Goleman, who is an expert on emotional intelligence really breaks down into 5 key characteristics: self-awareness, self-regulation, self-motivation, empathy, and social skills. So that's what we're here to talk about today, and hopefully, if you aren't already convinced that these things have a close relationship with cybersecurity and an impact on them, whether positive or negative, by the time we leave this room, hopefully we'll have you convinced that emotional intelligence is very important in the world of cybersecurity. So, let's start with kind of some general foundational aspects of emotional intelligence, most particularly self-awareness and self-regulation. Why do you think these characteristics are important for cybersecurity professionals?
You know, I've been working in this field for over 25 years, and initially and I think still today, there's this rhetoric that we need to have the technical skills, those mad skills that you can bring to the table. The thing is, cybersecurity is a lot more than just those tech skills. You need to bring all of your social skills, your empathy, your EI, as you called it, self-regulation, self-awareness, because we're not just working hands at a keyboard. We have to be aware of what we're doing, how it impacts our business, how it impacts customers, whoever your customer is. You need to bring all of you to the table. And to add to that, you have breaches. The majority of breaches are done are as a result of human error. And if you don't have an understanding of an awareness of other people, you're not going to be able to anticipate and proactively set yourself up to manage incidents and breaches. So it's the difference for me between having a security program and having a breach at the end of the day, if you don't have EI.
What about just, when it comes to self-awareness, how about being self-aware enough that you can recognize that you're going to burn out? Because as security professionals, security professionals are expected to know everything, have all the answers, and be on, quote unquote, 24/7. So and I know so many people who have burnt out not once but twice professionally, and I literally had breakdowns, right, because of the stress. So how do you feel about the importance of that sort of really deep self-awareness, so that you can recognize when you're about to burn out and reach out for help? Carlos?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. And it's great to be here with you today. And thank you for coming and joining this session with us today. I think it is critical. I think we need to understand that when we are doing cybersecurity, we cannot play the Lone Ranger. This is a sport that we need to play as a team, so we need help. I myself, when we were going through COVID, and I think that this is something that may have impacted more than one of us, I went through a lot of stress. I was very tired. So without noticing it and without calling it that way, I realized that I was not going through a good time. That was my reading of the situation in general. So my first reaction was to simply drop the firm I was working for, which I am still working for, and that will be the story. And I decided to quit. And I looked for another opportunity somewhere else. There was another organization that was kind enough with me to offer a generous job position. And when I started my process to leave the organization I was working for, it was pretty interesting to see how compassionate the firm ended up being and how empathetic they demonstrated they could be with me, and the way they treated the situation. What I want to say with this is that I started a conversation that I decided not to start before. And I started sharing how I was feeling and the frustrations I had and the challenges I was facing and the lack of support I was perceiving. And someone said to me, we understand the situation and we are sorry that you are going through this. What I think I have to tell you is that you don't need to wait for that to happen to raise your voice and let us know that you need help. And I learned my lesson. I understood that we need to ask for help when we need that help. And I decided to stay with that organization, with the firm. And I talked to the other organization and I said, guys, I think that I am fine where I am right now. And I want to apologize for the change I triggered with you. And they were very supportive as well, very understandable of the situation. And I stayed where I am working for now, or for the company I'm working for now. But my main message with this is that we don't have to be afraid of raising our voice. We don't have to be afraid of saying, I can't. We need to raise our voice to say, I need help. I have been on this space for more than 25 years as well, and it has always been a common message that we don't have enough people in this field, and we need more people in this field. What is shocking now is that we are still needing people, but in addition to that, we are losing people. There's many cybersecurity professionals, I think a third, based on a study I read recently, that are just changing careers because of the burnout, because they say, I want to live a life and I want to do something. And I respect, of course, when anyone wants to make a change, but I think it is pretty sad when it is the response of not having a proper management on both sides, ourselves and the company we are working for, or our clients, on dealing with these type of situations. And I think that we are living times where we need to be clear and loud when we have a need in order to resolve a need and the situation we are experiencing. That's what I wanted to share.
You know, you just reminded me of something, Carlos. In November, McKinsey published a report on women in the workforce, and it was not specifically about cybersecurity, but it's relevant because they talk about us being amidst the great breakup, and it's just that. So many women, in particular, are leaving the workforce for a number of reasons, and some of it is because of that, the stress. And I think women tend to say yes all the time. You know, I mean, I'm generalizing, of course, we're not all the same, but I think a lot of women have a hard time saying no, and that contributes also to the stress, right? Because we're just always taking on more, taking on more, taking on more. And Sherifat, you look like you have something to say.
Yeah, I was going to say that one of the most stressful situations we have in cybersecurity is during a breach, like you said.
Yeah.
And having an incident response plan helps. So when you have a plan that has been prepared before a breach happens, that certainly helps. So you are not under pressure to try to find out what to do. So managing that most stressful period with a prepared plan, basically be prepared before it happens. And then I wanted to say something on self-awareness, your first question. So it's very important that we, first of all, understand that behind our professional look, we are all humans, right? I'm somebody's mother and somebody's daughter, and so is my boss. You know, she's somebody's daughter or he is somebody's father. And what you don't want to be done to you, then don't do it, right? If you don't want to be spoken to, if you don't want to receive a certain reaction, you know, then don't give it to the other person. And it goes both ways, right? A lot of times we're only concerned about what's being done to the subordinate, but you should also think about your boss. Would you like to have a subordinate that is not supporting you, that is not considerate of your emotions, or, you know, having that at the back of your mind, at the back of their mind when they're relating with you is very important. So that would be one of the takeouts, that let's remember that behind our professional look, we are individuals and we are humans. And almost all of us, we have almost the same needs. Different culture, different background, but at the end of the day, we are all humans.
You know, so that leads me to think about the social skills aspect of emotional intelligence, right? Because social skills, when it comes to EI, it's about relationship management and recognizing how your emotions affect other people. And and frankly, just getting to know your teammates, because as you say, Sherifat, we're all human beings, right? And we've all got stuff. We've all got stuff going on in our lives, and we don't necessarily talk about it at work, you know, all the things going on in our lives at work. But all you have to do is ask people, and you know, and of course, empathy plays into that as well, right? So, any thoughts on, you know, elaborating on my points about either empathy or social skills, and how those things play into the success of a cybersecurity team, particularly under times of stress?
I'll jump in here. So I
Okay.
think when working with a team, whether in a leadership position or alongside colleagues, it's key to communicate expectations. So that would look like making sure your team members know what is required of them, what is required of their role, what they can do to contribute to department objectives, how they contribute to the bigger picture, what success looks like for the organization and how they fit into that. And then a big piece as well is about empowering autonomy. You want your team to feel like they have ownership, that you can delegate tasks to them, they'll get it done, you trust them, it helps boost morale. And just also being there as support. So being able to recognize when additional training is needed, ensuring the team has the tools that they need to be successful with those expectations that you've laid out.
And I wanted to add to that on social skills. So I'll give a typical example of my day-to-day job. I'm sitting with technology control owners, like people who knows about the technology. I'm coming from a cybersecurity risk point of view. And I want to understand the risks in this technology so that we can put adequate controls in place, right? But if I show up at the meeting, or, you know, no, with so much formality, no small side talk, no talk about the weather, I notice that all my questions and my responses are yes, no. And that doesn't really tell me much. But my social skill comes into play when I ask about the weather and we chat about the dog and the cat or the kids going crazy, whatever. People are more relaxed. They tell you even the issues about the system. Oh, Sherifat, do you know that we're struggling with getting the vendor to do this and that? And from there, I know the gaps, and I'm able to recommend the controls that should be put in place. So social skills goes a lot in cybersecurity. We cannot be up and proper, and you get the best from those that you're trying to protect at the end of the day, because they are going to be defensive as well, and they won't give you everything you need to know. So your social skills are quite important, and those small talks, they are very important, to be honest.
Karen,
I'd like to add to that. It's absolutely critical. We all have different roles, but at the end of the day, the objective is security and protection. And no matter what hat you're wearing when you come to the table, the conversation is about everyone collaboratively working towards achieving that goal, rather than working in silos, which happens in a lot of organizations. I think I was telling you earlier, you can use confidentiality as a sword or a shield, and that doesn't serve anyone in cybersecurity. Whether you're coming to find out about controls, whether you have an auditor coming in, whether or not there is an incident happening and you're communicating it, you want to do it from a perspective of working together and aligning towards solutions.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I just want to add to these elements. I think collaboration is key, and in this collaboration, in order to make it effective, I think that we also need to understand the social and the very specific characteristics of the different individuals in the team. Just to share another experience with you, I remember when I just moved, I was born and raised in Mexico, and every single time I talk about the situation, I say, one of the challenges we have in Mexico is that the country is full of Mexican people. And I know that sounds stupid, but what I mean by that is that in Mexico we have a very small number of persons coming from other countries. It is not as diverse as it is here. So every single time I move my head to any place, I will face someone that has the same cultural background, the same social background, very similar religion. So we don't have the differences that we have here. So when I came to Canada, I was working for a small consulting company, and I remember it was a small group of consultants working with me, 15. And I remember that every single day, one of them was just leaving the office at lunchtime, but he was never having lunch with us. And he was always coming back in a rush, like sweaty, agitated, and he looked like exhausted every single day. So after 4 or 5 days of seeing the same pattern, I just approached him to ask if anything was happening and if everything was fine. And he said to me, well, the challenge I'm having is that I have to go to the mosque every single day for praying. And the mosque is not necessarily close to the office, and that's why I always run to be there on time and make it back on time. And I said, well, is there anything else that we can do to help you? Is there a way for us to make it easier for you? And he said, well, I need a place to pray. And I said, well, that's fine. You can use the meeting room. We had just one meeting room. I mean, our office was significantly small. And I said, if you want to use a meeting room from 12 to, let's say, 1, is that enough? And he said, yes, okay, the meeting room is yours. Do with it whatever you want. And if after that you want to have lunch with us, we can even wait for you. And he said to me, I am fasting. And I said, what do you mean by fasting? And he explained to me what he meant by fasting. And I said, oh, I get it now. So I understand why you are not having lunch. So meeting room is yours. No lunch conversations with you anymore. Thank you for explaining to me the situation, and sorry for misunderstanding. So I think that understanding those circumstances that every single one is facing is critical as well. I have learned, and now I love the fact of the diversity we have in this country, because it gives different perspectives to what we do. But I think that in order to work as teams, we need to be as often as we can in the shoes of the other we are working with, we are interacting with, just to make it work. And I think the more we are able to do this type of things, the easier it will be for anyone to become vulnerable and say, excuse me, I need help. I am going through some issues. I am having some problems. I need help. Yep. The more we are able to do that, I think it will be easier to be just like that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I love it. So there's a perfect example of seeing something unusual.
And speaking up.
Yeah, and just asking the question, is everything okay? Is there something going on? Is there something I can help you with? That's empathy. That's empathy. That's wanting to know. Are there any educators in the room? Couple. So I teach a cybersecurity careers course, and everything we're talking about here, I teach to my students. And one of the things I do in the first class is I have them introduce themselves and tell me where they're from, because mostly they're international students, and tell me one fun fact about themselves. And some of them are uncomfortable at first when I ask this question, and they can't quite figure out why I'm asking. And it's as simple as this: I want to get to know them, and what makes them them, what makes them tick. Because I know they're not, they don't eat, sleep, and breathe cybersecurity 24 hours a day. Not yet. They may eventually. But it's important to just take the time to get to know people. And then I heard the word vulnerability from one of you, and I think that's the other side of the coin. We, as leaders, have to show our own vulnerabilities as well, right? In order to build that, the trust that you all have been talking about, build a safe environment where people feel like they can open up when they do need help, and that they won't be penalized for it, for needing help. Needing help doesn't mean you're failing, right?
Yeah.
But even failure is acceptable.
Yes.
And being able to fail and know that you have a team and support and that plan to deal with what happens when there is failure, because it's going to happen. Just like there's going to be a breach. There's never no risk. So we have to anticipate it and make room and space for it, and put some tools in our toolbox through our awareness of our organization, our colleagues and leaders, to be able to deal with it and handle it.
And I think some of those tools that you're referring to, Karen, include communication skills, collaboration, empathy, et cetera. And often cybersecurity is a field that has this myth that goes along with it, that everything we do is deeply technical, and to work in cybersecurity, you have to be a specialist, a technical specialist in some given area. And while that's partly true, we need specialists, we also need generalists, and we need, all of these power skills that we're talking about in this track today are absolutely critical to success in cybersecurity.
And to that point, when I was researching, just learning a bit more about emotional intelligence, and in preparation for this chat, one of the stats that struck me was that the majority of leaders and successful leaders have very high emotional intelligence. And that on average, there was one study that quoted about $30,000 more per year for those who have, and the correlation was that they had higher emotional intelligence. So, and it's an area that can be worked on. It's not just like you're born with it, you have it or you don't. It's one that you can improve, right?
Yeah.
And you know what's interesting? So I don't know if anybody in the room knows who, well, Pam, you know who Helen Patton is. Helen Patton is the CISO at Cisco, formerly the CISO advisor. And she wrote a book called Navigating the Cybersecurity Career Path. And she does talk about emotional intelligence in that book. And one of the things that she says that I love is, if somebody has to tell you that they have high emotional intelligence, they probably don't.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let me ask, are there any questions in the audience? No. Okay.
Are you
All right.
excited? Yeah,
got
there's
a
a question
question.
here.
Oh, sorry.
Thanks for a great session. I've actually, I noticed something which Sherifat, mentioned, that when you go in the meetings, you can maybe break the ice and just start talking about, other things other than work. Thank you. But one thing I've actually, realized, and I'm actually in the industry also for more than 20 years, right? So, mostly when we go in the meetings, as we all know, that it's actually man-dominated, still man-dominated actually, area. If they're talking about, hockey or something, maybe, the one lady over there with 10 guys, she's not interesting talking about, something like that, right? Maybe she's actually interesting talking about sewing or gardening, right? So I think, a couple of times I've seen that, can we move, from those kind of, discussions, in those meetings, right? And ladies maybe want to talk about kids, right? But men maybe don't want to talk about kids, right?
Or maybe they do, but they're just not.
Yeah,
Exactly.
Right? And if you
exactly.
open up the conversation and start talking about kids, they're going to jump right in, probably. We were having a conversation about kids before this panel this
Exactly.
morning.
Yeah.
So do you actually have those kind of
Yeah, and
experiences, and how do you deal with them?
Yeah, and I absolutely, I can relate to that, because sometimes even your meeting, you organize, you host on the meeting, and then they start discussing about something. But like Heather said, take the conversation back. Talk about what you want to talk about. Hey, guy, I don't know anything about hockey. How was the weather today? Switch it up, right? It's absolutely, and you'll be surprised that they're happy to also discuss about that. And that really helps, yeah? It gives you that freedom. You feel, a little bit more relaxed, and you have a meaningful meeting. And it just really helps ease out the whole conversation. So there's really nothing wrong with switching it up. If you feel like, I don't know about this topic, I want to contribute, switch it up. And most of the time, it's absolutely okay.
Yeah. Sherifat, I think also that when we do that, we can help break down gender stereotypes and gender barriers.
Exactly.
I'll give you an example. So I like to knit, and my daughter recently opened her own a yarn shop. Since she opened that store, I have discovered that there are a lot of men who knit. I had no idea, because we think that it's all, it's a girl thing, but it's not. In fact, she has an employee, a man who works for her and teaches people how to knit. I'm like, this is really cool. So you just never know. If you start bringing up other topics, you don't know what you're going to find in common with other people unless you You
You
bring
try.
up new things.
That's what I was going to say as well. So hockey is an example. I couldn't get into a deep conversation about that. But rather than trying to shift the conversation, I use it as an opportunity to ask questions, learn about the interests of my team. A personal example, one of my team is a hobby farmer. I know nothing about hobby farming, but I love seeing his pictures, I love hearing his stories, and just taking the opportunity to ask questions and understand his world and how he balances work and life and what that means for him.
We have another question, but I just want to add one thing before I forget this point. I think also this kind of plays into the topic of allyship. So I think that we as women, in having, breaking down barriers through small talk, we can also coach men to be better allies, to recognize when, oh, there's a woman in the room who, and by the way, maybe there are men in the room too who don't care about hockey, don't know anything about hockey. So let's switch it up, and we all have to be more socially aware.
For example, I am not a sports guy, and but I lived when I was a kid with my mom, my aunt, my grandma. So I remember having a huge discussion, a huge argument with a friend of mine who was asking me things about cars. And I said, dude, I don't know about tires or wheels. I just know that the car moved me from this point to this point, and that's enough. And he was really mad because I didn't know how to respond to a question related to the tire. And I said, do you know how to cook stuffed chiles? Well, I do, because I grew up seeing that, and I love cooking. Is there an issue with that? So you're right. It is not necessarily something that is associated to a gender, and I think we need to become more neutral on having these conversations in order to have everyone involved.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm just going to quickly add that I love cooking.
Cool.
I love cars. My dad's a mechanic. I grew up with foreign cars because he was a foreign car mechanic. So I got to see some really cool cars, drive cars. I love talking about them. I get very interested. It shakes guys up. Like, I was single woman with 22 guys for 9 years. And all they did was hockey. Every holiday, every party we did was hockey, hockey, hockey. They finally changed it to curling when I said, "Did you ever realize that I'm like really like I can't skate? I'm Canadian, but I can't skate." But I'll talk to it shifts their assumptions of gender norms when you bring up who you are, because we're not just that. We don't live in that box.
And I love, just to close with that, what Eloise was saying about asking questions. I think it is critical to ask questions just to understand what the other person is interested about, and to legitimately ask more about the stuff that is relevant for that other person, so that you can learn about what that other person knows and try to trigger a conversation. So knowing the other, I think, is going to be critical. Sorry, there's one more
Yes,
question.
let's go to the question.
Okay, hi everyone. My question is more around teamwork. So if you're in a team where the other members of a team are not really, the team spirit is not there, they are more about getting the work done and not carrying the other people along, what do you do in that kind of situation? Because you're working on a project where you need their input and everybody's supposed to work together, but you just have this group of team members that are so set in their ways, probably because of cultural background or something, but they are not really into carrying people along. You have to force information out of them. How do you handle such situation?
Any tips? So what do you do when you have a team of people who are set in their ways?
So I can make an attempt. So first of all, I don't think you should change who you are because of others, right? If you're the type, you love small talks, you like to engage people, and all other team members are uptight, that's what you're saying, right? Keep doing what you do, right? Still ask the question. They're not going to tell you, I'm not responding to you, right? Hey, how was your day? Is it cold where you are? What's the weather like? They'll respond to you, even if it's the one line and say, I'm fine, or whatever. They will still respond to you. There's something about consistency. If you keep doing what you're doing, right, one day they're going to flip. Somebody is going to engage you, and you never can tell what they are also struggling with. Some people have really had bad experiences, maybe where they haven't been encouraged to speak up and they've been shut up like, just don't talk, keep quiet, and then they just maintain that, and that's the same culture they're bringing to the team. So you don't have to, also shut up and, create that poker face, be straightforward. Be you. If you're someone that loves small talk, give your small talk before the meetings. They will come around. And sometimes it's awkward, especially when you're new on a team. You meet this existing culture of everybody's just sticking to this, and you're coming with your jovial self, and it may be a little bit awkward, but gradually, people will accept you for who you are. They know this lady is going to come and she's going to talk about small talks before we go into the meeting. Well, we have to make room for that. And gradually, that might actually change. That may lead to a change in the team.
Yeah, Sherifat, I think it's the consistency and it's small acts over time that will drive change. There's a book called How to Be an Ally, and the author, Miranda, that's what she says about allyship. It's one act at a time. So you don't have to make grandiose changes, and you're not necessarily going to change everybody on the team overnight, but if you just make small acts of kindness every day and get to know the people, ask questions, and by the way, food helps. I do this with my students. I bring every other week I bring treats, and it makes them open up.
I just want to add, I joined a team about 8 months ago, and all of my colleagues had their own teams that they were building and growing and creating their own strategies. And I looked across all the teams, and for myself, I'm very collaborative, and I often think, why recreate the wheel? Why are we all doing the same things independently when we could be doing them collectively? So I took a look at what our overall goals were, and then I just threw a half-hour session in everyone's calendars, and I just said, okay, I don't want to redo what you're all doing, so why don't we all just brainstorm and see if we can all swim together in the same boat rather than individually swimming? And asked a lot of questions. It basically brought them out of their shells in terms of sharing, hey, this is what I'm doing, and then all of a sudden collaboration started. It took time, but that's another option to consider.
Speaking of collaboration, we talked about it quite a bit, but one thing I don't think we've touched on yet is when it comes to relationship management is working with vendors and customers and other partner organizations or alliances, because it's not just about working with your coworkers, right, in-house. So any further comments on the importance of emotional intelligence there? Are there any other things we should know?
Yeah, I think, so as a program manager, I work with a lot of vendors for various projects, and it is important to build those positive relationships. When you initiate the conversation with a new vendor, I have a long list of needs, requirements, questions, concerns. So working with that new vendor to build the trust, to collaborate, and just turn it into more of a mutual partnership and less of that buyer-seller relationship. Also just leveraging emotional intelligence to, when it comes to escalations, which happen when you're working with a vendor, you need to be able to remain calm, actively listen, and come to an ending that is satisfactory for everybody involved. And just, like I said, make it a partnership and less of a buyer-seller, leveraging EI to build that.
I'll add to that. And give you a story. One of my previous roles, I headed up customer compliance, and my first week at this role, I went into a session with a very, very large financial institution who was, we were storing some of their data, so we were actually the vendor, they were our customer, and they had security questions. And I went in, and I was just there to observe for the first time, and they brought in this security guy who was incredibly hostile, angry, waved the contract around and said, there's no way you get access to this information, and was just breaking trust left, right, and center. They walked away angry. He walked away angry, and I sat there thinking, this is my new role. But I brought everybody to the table again after having individual conversations and said, okay, what's the outcome and what's the goal? What can we give the customer? What do they need to satisfy their audit requirements, and let's find a different path, and let's not bring that guy to the table, and we can speak on his behalf and get the information. Because not everybody is the right person to put in front of the customer, and you don't want to break trust. You want to build trust. They're there to verify relationships with customers, with vendors, even with your colleagues. You're building trust and relationships as you go.
Yeah.
So Karen,
I was just going to emphasize something she said about that individual talk. So you went back and had individual talks with one of them.
Yes.
That is very important. So in the workplace, those are the things you call being political. We can't avoid things like that. So she's gone ahead to have those small talks so that when they all come together, there's a kind of synchronization in what you're talking about. And these are some of the things nobody's going to teach you, in class. Well, in the workplace, to manage people, there's some of the things you learn.
Karen, earlier you said that good leaders have high emotional intelligence. So let me ask you this. How do you think emotional intelligence can help leaders lead teams, particularly in times of stress? And
Absolutely. It's about unification and collaboration and having direction and trust in your team, to what Eloise said. You have a couple of choices, especially in our field. It is high stress. There is a lot of accountability and ownership that we take on as cybersecurity practitioners. Whatever role you take, you are part of a whole. And really great leaders see your value, bring your value to the table, and they'll bring everybody together. They'll break those silos. It's really important. I have another story, and this is why I brought, if you saw me come up with, like I'm sitting on it. I kept this in my office. This is a book. This is the original copy of Chicken Little, and I keep it there, and I keep this story in my head because as cybersecurity practitioners, as soon as a breach or an incident can happen, you get hijacked, you get like stressed, you're like, what do I have to do? I have to respond, and so on. You can choose to be Chicken Little and scream that the sky is falling, or you can choose to have a solution, work and have a plan, and to me, great leadership organizes everyone and aligns everyone towards solutions rather than problems.
And I think what you've just described there is not just high emotional intelligence, but it's servant leadership. And call me crazy, but I think the two are very closely tied. Having high emotional intelligence and being a servant leader, having that ability to bring people together, to encourage collaboration, to build that foundation of trust that all of our teams need.
Absolutely.
Do we have any other questions? Oh, we've got a couple more questions here in the audience.
Yep.
The microphone is coming. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Afifa. I'm an international student and I'm from Bangladesh. So I have been working in the cybersecurity industry. It's been 8 years. I was very much well known within my organization as a deny all. And Afifa, she blocks everything. She is a deny all. And at some point, I started to feel that my colleagues, they don't really like me. And just because I work in the cybersecurity industry and very much strict, it was nothing personal. It's because I had to, because that was the demand of my role. And in events and everything, they were somehow intimidated to talk to me even. So how do you deal? I mean, have you also faced something like that, and how did you deal with that? Thank you.
Can I attend?
Yes.
Okay, so I totally relate with what you're saying. When I was younger in my career, I used to be a denial as well. Everything is a no, lockdown. It's a security mindset, no access, nothing. And what happened was I got into leadership. So I went from being responsible for security to being responsible for IT. And my mindset changed. You can't over-secure than what the business wants. If you secure to an extent that the business cannot work, then you are not doing anything. So my first response to you is have a mindset, consider having a mindset change of, I'm supposed to enable the business. My mindset is not about denial, right? Yeah, we will deny in security, but not to an extent where the business cannot work. So be a little bit more collaborative with them, understand from their point of view, and have that discussion as well. you are not just denying all because you want to deny them everything and lock down access. It's because security. And sometimes they don't understand the reasons. I was at a session the other day, and the technology owner was asking, I mean, the data we're sharing with this system is just employee email addresses. What can happen to that? I could go to LinkedIn and get a list of all the employees in this organization and guess the domain and get their email addresses. Why are we so concerned about the security of email addresses? And I had to explain, did you consider that if we have these amounts of email addresses with a third party and is breached, our employees could be subjected to phishing attacks, spamming attacks, and then they started thinking in that direction as well. So, and that changed the whole conversation from then thinking that I was just trying to enforce my, my security opinion on them, and it became more open from a risk point of view. So when you explain the reasons, okay, do you know if we do this, these are the risks, this is what is going to happen, then you find it a little bit more easier to
And it
engage.
fosters the conversation of what else can we do?
Mm-hmm.
How can we meet those objectives? I've lived in the kingdom of no, that's what I call it, and have been the queen of the kingdom of no at times too. So I hear you. However, I've come to learn that security needs to be and is an enabler for business, especially today. So instead of no, it's okay, that doesn't work, but what can work? So let's brainstorm and let's come to the table, because I know this path isn't right, but is there another one we can find?
Yeah.
And open that conversation.
Yep. So back to cybersecurity is a team sport, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Carlos, we
Exactly.
started there.
Yes.
Unfortunately, we are just about out of time. I know there's at least one more question in the room, but
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I have to begin to wrap things up here.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to end this way. Any final piece of advice to our audience when it comes to emotional intelligence from each of you?
Yeah, I'll start. I'll say we've heard the word empathy numerous times from the stage. So I encourage everybody to embrace empathy. By prioritizing empathy, you're gonna improve your communications. You're gonna build trust. And at an org level, you're going to empower your end users to make better decisions, which is what it's all about.
Thanks, Eloise. Embrace empathy. Karen?
For me, I think one that I'd like to leave you with is about your toolbox. I mentioned it a bit earlier. We deal with high stress situations, and we have a lot of responsibility, and I really encourage you to start putting some tools in your toolbox to deal with those stresses, and so you don't get to burnout. Whether
Sherifat?
it's meditation or a walk, go for it.
Yeah.
Mine is simple. Remember, we are all humans. You are human, the next person is also human.
I love it. Carlos?
Thank you. I think we need to talk more about this. I love the idea from CWC, CyberX, on having this type of topics discussed in this type of events, because it's always bits and bytes and qubits, perhaps. But we need to stay away a little bit from that, because we are all human, and we need to find this empathy we are looking for. So we need to find a space to talk about social aspects and mental considerations, because it is important, it is relevant for us to be successful. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. All right, so my final comment is this. Please, I'd like to encourage all of you to embrace emotional intelligence, not just empathy, but all aspects of emotional intelligence. If it was not a topic you were familiar with before coming to this talk, please do some research and see what you can do to heighten your own emotional intelligence over the coming weeks, months, and years. And then I want to thank you all for joining us this morning. Please know that the next session starts in 10 minutes, so there's just a quick break right now. After the next session, there'll be a longer networking break. And finally, please come and visit me and Karen in our WESIS Ontario affiliate Career Village down the hall, where we're offering resume reviews, LinkedIn reviews,
Interview
career
prep.
conversations, and mock interviews.
Yeah. Great.
Thank you.